Hello, so in this video I'm going to talk through the impact of the alphabet agencies on civil rights. So this relates to EdXL A-level history, civil rights in the USA 1850 to 2009, and specifically topic 3, the New Deal and civil rights. So this video is due to a request by somebody who put a comment on one of my videos just asking for this. So if you've got any other requests, either relating to the civil rights topic or perhaps the Stuart Britain topic or anything else about exam technique, please let me know. I'm happy to try my best to meet those requests. So let's get stuck into this, the alphabet agencies and civil rights. The first thing to say is, to discuss the intention of the alphabet agencies. So the alphabet agencies were established during the New Deal to combat the Great Depression and aimed to address a variety of economic and social issues. The New Deal itself is primarily an economic series of policies. So it's really to do with helping the economic position of America and the American population. And I've said here, although the alphabet agencies did help African Americans, they weren't primarily focused on the advancement of civil rights. And I've actually done a separate video that I'll link to in the description, covering this topic where I talk about topic 3, the New Deal and civil rights more generally. But I think that's a general point to take away from this, that the intention of the alphabet agencies wasn't primarily civil rights. They might have helped African Americans because African Americans were disproportionately poor, more likely to be in need of welfare, but the focus wasn't civil rights. So I think that's quite an important point to make. Okay, so the first alphabet agency. So what I'm going to do is run through the different alphabet agencies and then I'll do a summary at the end. So the first alphabet agency is the AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Administration, established in 1933. And the purpose of this is to boost agricultural prices by reducing surpluses. That's basically all you need to know for this topic. But what the impact of this was on civil rights is it actually led to a lot of evictions of African American sharecroppers, 200,000 between 33 and 40. So that's obviously a negative, people being evicted. Interestingly, once when I was teaching this, a student made an interesting point about this, that yes, it's in the short term it's negative, but perhaps in the long term, to break that cycle of sharecropping, perhaps in the longer term it's more of a positive. But I think obviously we're talking mainly in this topic, we're talking about the impact there and then, which was negative. And until 1936, federal compensation to farmers to make less produce was given to landowners. So African Americans were more likely to be farm laborers and farm workers, so wouldn't have seen that compensation. So the AAA is an example of an agency that provided little help to African Americans. So the next one is the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, again 1933. And this was established to revitalize the economy of southern states, so building dams, hydroelectric dams, for example. And in terms of impact on civil rights, this is pretty significantly a negative. So African American workers were segregated, received less opportunities. So, for example, in counties with 7% African American population, only 2% of TVA jobs went to African Americans. So they were underrepresented. And this actually led to a complaint by the NAACP. So I think a broader point to make about the New Deal is the discrimination on a local level and thinking about the context. So, for example, in the southern states, Jim Crow existed. African Americans faced widespread kind of discrimination and segregation. So we can see that the alphabet agencies, although they are federal, on a local level, that discrimination is still there, if that makes sense. Next up is the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, again established in 1933, and this is to provide employment through public works. The CCC was run by a conservative, and there was examples of discrimination in Fort Dix in New Jersey, which is of course in the north. So that's an example of, more widespread discrimination in New Deal alphabet agencies, and that what happened there, just in short, was some African American workers went on strike, and they were fired. They went on strike because they wanted to highlight the poor conditions that they faced in this camp, And yeah, they ended up being fired. So this led to federal government intervention, which led to increased black recruitment. Um, and there was about 200,000 African Americans who worked for the CCC, but were often restricted to low skilled jobs. So again, largely, it does provide some help, but not as much help as it could have. And again, a broader point, I think I'll talk about this in my topic 3 revision video, is just thinking about is some help better than no help? Obviously, this could have done more and there was discrimination, but potentially, it's still providing some help to African Americans. Next one is the NRA, the National Recovery Administration. So that was established in 1933 to help business and manufacturing. And again, this is largely negative, really. So African Americans faced discrimination on a local level where their jobs were recoded so that African Americans didn't receive equal pay. And the NRA became famous among the African American population for its unfairness. So just generally another example of the kind of the discrimination at that local level where the intention was there, but actually on a local level there was that discrimination. The next one is the Public Works Administration. This is a much more positive one for the impact on African Americans and civil rights. So this was established in 1933 and provided employment through public works. So this is headed by Harold Ickes, who was pro-civil rights. He'd actually been president of the Chicago branch of the NAACP before he was involved in the PWA. And it spent $65 million on the improvement of African American schools, homes, and hospitals, and used quotas and equal pay. So much more positive impact on African American civil rights and particularly kind of economic and social issues, as I said. The next one is FERA, so the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, again established in 1933, provided work for 20 million people. So it did provide work for African Americans. 3.5 million African Americans worked for the FERA, but there's evidence of discrimination on a local level. For example, in Atlanta, there was monthly relief checks of $32. That should be $32 there. $32 to white Americans, compared to $19 for Black Americans. So showing again that local level discrimination and kind of inequality, which is obviously a theme for a lot of these New Deal agencies. Next up is the Federal Housing Administration, which was established in 1934 to help homeowners with mortgage payments. And again, we've got the intention here to help people get on the housing ladder and buy homes, but it did promote this issue of redlining. And redlining was where they had maps of areas, of the Atlanta one is here, and they color-coded them in terms of the risk that they thought that it was for people to get mortgages. So basically, people who lived in the red areas, it was advised not to give them mortgages. So what this meant for African Americans was they couldn't get on the housing ladder and ended up, having to rent. And if you think about that, it stops kind of people investing in their homes and having that as an asset. And this is something that people have written about a lot, and the idea of this, like the long-term impact of this, is really significant. And if we think about in future topics, when you talk about particularly like topic 6, when you talk about the change in geography and kind of like issues in ghettos, this can be seen as a forerunner to those kind of problems of housing issues. So the FHA definitely didn't help as much as it could have. The WPA is next, the Works Progress Administration, established in 1935. Again, employment through public works, and employed 2 million people. It employed 350,000 African Americans and implemented an education program that employed 5,000 African American teachers. So again, this is a much more positive example of a New Deal agency in terms of Black American civil rights. Okay, we've just got a couple more left. Next up is the National Youth Administration, the NYA, established in 1935 to help the young unemployed. And it provided training for 500,000 African Americans. the African American division was headed by Mary McLeod Bethune, who was a friend of Eleanor Roosevelt, and I think I'll talk more about that in my general revision video for topic 3. And actually, Lyndon Johnson worked for the NYA, so we can see the kind of longer term impact on Lyndon Johnson's ideology about government intervention. Of course, he passes the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act in the 60s. So the NYA, much more positive. Again, and this is one that really does have a division aimed at African Americans. So arguably the most kind of specific, targeted welfare for African Americans of all these alphabet agencies. Last up is the Social Security Act of 1935, which provided welfare for the old and needy. And this does provide welfare, but in terms of kind of benefits payments, agricultural and domestic workers were excluded from the Social Security Act, and they were predominantly African Americans. So the impact of the Social Security Act on civil rights is greatly limited. So just in summary, there's and the way to think about it in terms of your revision is just highlighting which are more positive and which more negative. So the PWA, the WPA, and the NYA, certainly in my reading of it, are much more positive for African American civil rights. The more negative ones you can see in the list there, the AAA, TVA, CCC, NRA, FERA, and FHA. And what I would suggest is if you could try and, in terms of your revision, remembering a couple of pieces of evidence for each one and kind of a brief summary. You probably don't need to remember all of the negative ones. I think if you can remember 3 negative and the 3 positive, that's probably enough. But I would probably try and revise all of them just in case you get a question that requires that precise evidence. So I hope that was a useful summary of the alphabet agencies and the impact on civil rights. I did go through that reasonably quickly, but if you've got any questions, any feedback, any more requests, please let me know in the comments. Thanks for listening.